Dr. Benjamin Caplan. How are you?
I'm great. It's great to be here. I'm excited for the conversation.
Absolutely. Nice to have you here. Dr. Caplan, what is success for you? And how do you define your why?
What is success and how do I define why? Success for me is both personal and professional. Personal, it is living a happy life where I'm supporting a happy, healthy family, supporting my wife and children, and doing what brings me satisfaction, what brings me joy. And on the professional side is, what am I contributing? What am I giving back to the culture, to my community, to the country, to the world? Because I think we've all watched a world change. I think no matter how old you are, young people are very frustrated. Older people are even more frustrated. And the seniors among us have witnessed a real transition that most people don't think is a good one. So I'm trying to do what I can to make a small difference. And I'm honestly blessed to have found a niche in medical cannabis where the world has really gotten it wrong. And I have an opportunity to both teach and help people improve their lives.
That's awesome. Now, so being at the subject, can you tell us a little bit about your journey? How did you start? What happened along the way? And where are you now?
Yeah. So I'm one of these crazy doctors that actually listens to my patients. I grew up in a household with a neurologist. My father's a world famous neurologist, published hundreds of journals and books that are revered across the world, but he's a good clinician. He listens to people. He understands that medicine is not just figures and numbers and money, that it's about real people and real lives that we can have an impact on. So I was blessed to watch him and how he practiced growing up, and it taught me to listen. And I heard from my patients that cannabis was helping them. I didn't know anything about it. I wasn't taught about cannabis in school. I didn't have good role models that showed me anything positive about cannabis, but my patients did. And I had the study skills to look up what the literature has shown us about cannabis. And of course, there's some bad stuff, but there's also some good stuff. And any good doctor, any good scientist will look on both sides of a balance and come to a judgment. And the judgment I came to was helped by my patients to see that cannabis really has a place in modern medicine.
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree with you. There's so many positives and negatives to so many things in medicine. And it's great that someone takes the positives and transforms them into great things. What they say is that great things are good multiplied by 10,000 times, right? So you have to do good every day with patients to become a great, successful doctor. Now, can you tell us a little bit about how you started in this little niche that you have?
Sure. I jumped in quite early. It's over 10 years ago. And there was really nobody in the field that was public and proud and knowledgeable. Unfortunately, there's a big choice between Dr. Google, where people are looking up online, whatever happens to be published by anybody, or Dr. Pothead. There are a lot of doctors out there who are fanatical about cannabis, in part because it's a major part of their everyday life. I wasn't really drawn to either one. I wanted something in the middle. I'm a pretty square doctor. I'm an academic. I'm a nerd. I love studying. I love what evidence-based medicine has taught the practice of medicine. So I felt like I could represent evidence and share what the literature was teaching me with the rest of the world. So I have a clinic where I'm seeing patients as a specialist, just like we'd see a dermatologist. But I also have opportunities where I teach the world and some businesses that I've started where I'm trying to influence how the economy is run. How are we learning about cannabis? How are we following patients and learning about what they're doing? And where are the other opportunities in our culture? Older adults, seniors have the most to gain by consuming cannabis, both personally for them and for our government. Medicare and Medicaid are government funded health insurance. And if they're paying for things which are not cannabis, what are they missing out on because they're not engaged with cannabis? It's a huge puzzle that I'm fortunate to be involved in.
Yeah, it's a very recent development, right? Like you said, in terms of legislative power to give doctors the opportunity of prescribing something like this to their patients. And state by state, everybody was like going on this little train. And I'm sure more about the subject. But can you tell us a little bit of how you developed your knowledge about cannabis from the medical point of view? And then how did you transition to use that in creating a business out of it?
Many people know, but not everybody, that there is a national database of all literature that's published. PubMed is a free resource where anybody who wants to can see what literature is surfacing from scientific research. So I dove into PubMed, and if you summarize all the articles about cannabis, you actually get 10 times more literature than what we know about the common cold or Lyme disease. There's a massive amount of information out there. Cannabis is not some new drug. It's actually only the last 100 years that we don't know much about cannabis. Actually, in the entire history of humankind is tied very closely with cannabis. We have archaeological evidence, we have medieval evidence, we have historical evidence from the colonies, the early colonies. This has been part of the human experiment forever. So I tapped into some of the history. I learned what we had been not taught through education in modern life for no good reason, but I learned what I could based on what's published. And most of all, I learned from my patients. I started a clinic where I'm seeing people over time, and some of my patients now I've seen for 10 plus years. So I'm learning from them and the individual experiences of thousands of people, when they started, why they started, how it's going, what went wrong, what went well. And I'm learning that. And that's actually what I published in this book you can see behind me, the Doctor Approved Cannabis Handbook, is it's a manual for how to consume cannabis based on what people have found success with.
Very interesting. I'm sure my podcast addresses all these little niches in medicine with everybody. And I hope the audience will learn a lot from you, because this is not only a new domain, but there are very few people who actually dive deep into this subject. How did you make a business out of this? And where are you now in terms of like entrepreneurship?
I learned from nothing. I don't have a business background, but I'm fortunate to be around people who were
Medical school, right?
They don't teach this in medical school. and they don't teach really bucking trends in business school either. I think I learned from, as I said, people around me. I started as the chief medical officer and founder of a company that was essentially bringing guidance to products. When someone buys a product, they take it home and nobody really knows what happens with it. And I developed the idea with my friends to bring insights. We know about blockchain now, crypto, and tracking transactions over time. We should be tracking what patients buy for medicine and seeing if they take them. Think about it. Those of us who go to pharmacies for medicines, we get a prescription from the pharmacist, we take it home. The doctors don't know if we're taking that medicine, if it's going well, if it's not going well. That's a huge, important piece of the medical puzzle that's missing. So in the new domain of cannabis, I was able to help get that going. That company actually sold very quickly for other reasons, but I restarted that same idea with some other friends in a new company where we're tracking people and guiding them with how cannabis is going. That's called EO Care. And any idea that I see that needs guidance or needs to be built up, I create a business around it.
Interesting. And where is your business now? Do you have multiple clinics? Do you have people that are working for you? Did you delegate a lot of that?
So I have multiple businesses now. Yeah, I have a clinic business, which has multiple locations, has had for the last 7 or 8 years. I also have other businesses that engage with the mainstream industry. EO Care is a business that was reaching out to cancer organizations throughout the country, is reaching out to employers to help them see the benefits of covering cannabis for their employees. I also have other businesses like this project called the Commonwealth Project, where we're trying to bring seniors care, as I was alluding to before. We're trying to show Medicare and the government that they stand to gain a lot by engaging with cannabis, learning who in the senior community is consuming cannabis, who isn't, what are the benefits they're finding, what are any concerns. We don't have this basic information, and that's important for doctors to feel comfortable being on board. So there's a lot of work still to be done, but that means there are opportunities too.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to deconstruct your mindset a little bit for my audience. You started off as a doctor treating patients, and then you transitioned to being a business entrepreneur, and you're now a successful one. Tell us a little bit about your transition in your mindset from seeing one patient at a time to create businesses that are seeing multiple patients at a time and delegate most of the work to each people.
Yeah, I think a lot of clinicians like myself are afraid because we weren't taught about it. And that's really where networking and community and reaching out to other experts. I have my swim lane. I'm an expert of medicine and science. I know how to read. I know how to learn. Thankfully, I know how to communicate with patients, but I don't know how to start a business. I don't know what documents are required, what the regulatory hurdles are. So I find people who have that specialty. I connect with them. We become friendly. I say, look, can you help me with this? I have an idea. Does that seem right? And then there's a conversation about how we make this happen. How do we fund it? And certainly you can have investors and they become sort of other friends who tackle the money part of the equation. There's some clinicians who have the fortune of being able to support it themselves, which of course gives them a little bit more control. They don't have outside voices, but some combination of this tactic where you're reaching out to people and building a network of people that have their swim lane, and together you build a whole swim course. So I've been fortunate to team up with people who are knowledgeable in each of these areas, and I've had guidance every step of the way. I seek mentorship. I know that I don't know everything, and that humility has brought me opportunity to connect with people who know a lot about their domains.
Yeah, this is very important. Exactly what you said. You were taking care of your own lane, and now you build a full Olympic swimming pool of yours, basically. I want to dive deeper into the fact that you mentioned mentorship, and you mentioned connecting with other people that are not necessarily in your field, but they're experts in their field. to help you out. And this is a very important thing for, in general, for medical doctors that are, we're taught by life and by medical school to do everything on our own, to take our, care of own patients, do our own judgment, do our own medical records, and have our own clinic. How did you transition from that mindset to somebody who realized that you need to get help for things that you don't know and build a business around it? Because it's a mindset that not many people have, and they're struggling with delegating their actions to someone else in the same time have control about it.
No, it's a hard thing because, as you say, doctors are built up to be leaders in their domain and to tell, residents how to function, interns to run the medical system. And in business, I think it was Steve Jobs that said he hires people who know more than he does so that he can have a view that's large and be able to let the experts do their thing. So I think part of my recipe is just humility. I know that I don't know everything and I want to succeed, but I want to succeed with my patient, the people in front of me, or the group of people I'm trying to help. Just this week, I'm having a discussion about the seniors project. And what can I offer? I can't fix Medicare. I don't have those connections, but I can speak to a group of geriatricians. And so that's what I offer. Hey, I'm happy to talk to a group of geriatricians. And I can even start that with a question. What do you doctors know about cannabis? And it's really very simple. It doesn't have to be, hey, I have a solution for you. We're going to make a lot of money. We're going to help a lot of people. It can be, where are we right now? What's the big picture that we can all get in sync with? And that right now is actually ignorance. We don't know about how cannabis is helping or not helping seniors. My clinical experience has guided me so far. I know from the patients I've seen that this is overwhelmingly helpful for them. It saves them from pharmaceuticals. It stops them from needing other medicines. It actually prevents them from needing to clog up the medical system because they're okay at home. So how do we make this something that's real? What experts do we need? What studies do we have to find? These are all kind of simple steps that can be combined slowly.
Yes, definitely. And I think it takes an umbrella approach from a CEO like yourself to think about the big picture in all your businesses and get the people to help you out doing that. Now, do you still practice medicine?
I do. Yeah. I have a full-time clinic. I don't know how I find the time.
I don't know. I want to ask you about that.
Yeah. I'll tell you, one of the things that I do is always check myself with where I'm happy. But if I'm not happy doing clinical work, I'm going to shift that. One of my businesses before was actually just organizing literature. It seems so silly. I mentioned PubMed before, but PubMed doesn't buy or have access to free journals all the time. So I actually created my own library, which I offer on a Google Drive so that nobody has headaches to read the literature that I'm reading. But over time, I saw that library as a little bit of a pain. I didn't want to spend all this money buying literature. I didn't want to upload it all the time. You know what? Hey, artificial intelligence is growing up in this time too. So what I decided to do was build a company around a librarian, a chatbot librarian, where I can program a bot that can read the library. It can translate all that jargon and that scientific complexity into language that anybody can read and understand. And all of a sudden, this becomes marketable. There are plenty of companies out there that would love to have an automatic translator of cannabis science that is not too complicated, that's simple. And it's not too hard actually to have that chatbot not only teach, but translate what someone's selling. So if I have an online tool that can share knowledge and share information about SKUs at a store, we have a real business opportunity. And that just came from me being sick and tired of uploading too much. So I think some of this is just humility and self-awareness.
Yeah, that's a very simple approach from what you're saying, because you identify those areas where we need improvement and you create a business out of it. It seemed to be like a small little idea lab for those medical issues that we all have. Let's talk a little bit about how your day is structured as an entrepreneur in medical field. So what is that you do every day? What are your daily routines, your habits to develop to get you where you are right now?
So I'm the most important thing in my schedule. My sanity has to stay stable. So I actually love the freedom to design my own schedule. If my kids want to do something special, or if my wife and I want to go on vacation, I want to have that opportunity. So I built a schedule where I control it. And I'm fortunate to have a clinic where I have that power, and I have businesses that are friendly enough to allow me to slide the slots in as fits my schedule. But my day is never the same 2 days in a row, which is very strange to some people. Some people like that routinity, the monotony of same thing every day. I don't. So what I do is actually allow patients of mine to schedule whenever they want, and that's convenient for them, but they can only schedule around the other things I have in my daily routine. So my exercise schedule, my habits of eating, my family time, those are carved out. And the rest is up to the businesses and my patients and when they want to book. So it's remarkably simple and actually quite inexpensive. I don't have a huge team monitoring me or fine tuning my schedule. It's just left to chance, basically.
Yeah, that's an interesting approach. You put yourself first and then you gather everybody else schedules around yourself. That's a great approach. What about your
Keeps my
eating
sanity.
habits? Mentioned that your eating habits, your exercise habits. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. One of the things that I've seen that's disappointing in the medical community is some doctors who don't have healthy habits themselves. They don't practice what they preach. I had that early and I realized, of course, that exercise was important to me and eating well is important to me. So I've built a calendar schedule where I get to do the exercise routine I want on the schedule that I need. And that's a priority I set, just like my priority with my family life. And I build that in from the ground up. I don't let work chase me out. And I can hear listeners asking, wait a minute, how do you make that financially viable? And the truth is it wasn't initially. This has been an adjustment I had to make over time. Good entrepreneurs, it's really hard work and dedication that comes at the beginning. And over time, you get to have flexibility. It doesn't start out that way.
Yes, absolutely. Being a successful person doesn't necessarily mean you were like this from the beginning. And I want to ask you if there was anything in your past, not necessarily as a failure, but something that didn't really pan out for you that kind of pushed you forward and you learned from it. Can you give us an example of that?
Of course, my camera just hang out. Sometimes technology is a failure.
You magically disappeared when I asked you this question.
Yes, no. So I've failed a lot. I've heard a lot of entrepreneurs talk about the glory of failure and you don't really learn anything unless you're failing. And I think there's some truth to that, but I also am not rushed. And I think patience is an antidote to failure. And when you can be patient meeting these partners and learning about your network, you'll notice things that don't fit with you. And sometimes the team breaking down, bad relationships inside a company can be the cancer that kills a company. So being patient with learning about who you're going to be working with, being patient with your needs. Some people need that rigorous schedule. Some people need vacation time. Understanding yourself is really important. And then some of it is luck of the draw. And most companies fail. And that's a sober reality that you have to understand and set your expectations accordingly. Many people in the business world try to entice doctors with equity. This is something I've seen really broadly, that doctors are excited about owning a piece of a company. And then, oh my gosh, they have 7% or 3% of a company. But if the company isn't worth anything, if the company fails, then 7% is 7% of nothing. So it's important for doctors, I think, out there who might be listening, think more about cash compensation than equity. If you're spending your time, you're sharing your expertise, that's worth something to your day today. And you need to be able to cash that value. There's, of course, value in making an alliance with a doctor and a company over time so that the doctor stays with the company. That's really where equity comes into play. But it's very tempting for doctors who don't have education about business to just be persuaded by equity and then find that it's worthless and then feel burned out by the industry that sort of abuses them.
Yeah, that's so true. Sometimes the fact that you have equity doesn't necessarily mean you have success in that specific domain. And to be honest with you, not all the people are born or meant to be owners or business entrepreneurs. And it's definitely a trait that it's developed and it's groomed with your personal development skills and all the mentorships that you have. Can you tell us a little bit about what kind of help did you look for when you started this enterprise? And you mentioned mentorships. Do you have any kind of circles you go to, networking? Do you have any podcasts, any books that you read consistently?
I'm a crazy doctor because I'm, as you said, an idea guy and I live in the clouds and I have a brain that just doesn't sit within a box. And I've always been that way. If someone shows me a rule, I think about how can we bend that rule? How can we find a solution that's outside that rule? It's just the way my brain works. And that's sometimes very difficult. It has its place in business, but it's also very difficult. So I've known that for a long time. And I have people around me, my wife and my brother, some of my closest relatives who check me, who keep me in check and say, hey, wait a minute, that's a little bit of a crazy idea. Why don't you think about that? As I said, patience is important, but it doesn't have to be 100% you. And sometimes having people around you who know your limitations and know your faults can help keep you balanced. So for me, what's the people around me that I trust most? I read a ton. And part of scientific reading, as all scientists know, is balance. We started talking about this right at the beginning, that there's some things that are good, some things that are bad. And reading a lot of science means you read on both sides of the balance. So sometimes just staying informed and hearing lots of different opinions has its own balancing effect for my own ventures, my own direction. I think that's one of the struggles with our culture now, actually, that we have such a polarized culture. You're either this way or you're that way. And we've lost track of the middle ground. And of course, everybody, if you ask will say, wait a minute, moderation is key. Too much of anything is bad. We have these heuristics in our culture, but we don't necessarily apply them as professionals. And certainly most of the physicians I know are lost in their work or lost in their goals, but don't take a balanced approach.
Did you have any mentors on your way here?
Yeah. One of the business leaders I now work with and have worked with for 5 years is Howard Kessler. He's a financial services magnate. Most of what we know of as Affinity credit cards is because of this one man. And he's taken me under his wing, and he's been a mentor for many years. And I'm inexorably grateful for him taking pity on me. But he's also a visionary mind and thinks outside the box. So we have a lot in common. My brother, as I mentioned, is a lawyer and thinks very much about rules and thinks about where the box is. So he's been a nice balance for me. Most of my mentors through training. I was sometimes a difficult student because of the way my brain works, but I had a lot of mentors in medical school, in my undergraduate education, that took me under their wing and helped me form the mind that works now. And when in compensation, I've taken mentees myself and I've learned a lot and now pay it back. So I think that's another on-ramp for a lot of doctors who might be listening. Look for mentors. It doesn't have to be a quid pro quo. It can just be someone you look up to. We all have now a network online. Doximity is an app where any doctor can connect with any other doctor. Reach out for mentorship, ask questions.
Yeah, that's a great advice. And I totally recommend that. I got a few mentors along the way, and I still have mentors right now and coaches, and you learn every day from somebody else's experiences. And I think you mentioned something very important, the fact that you need to be open-minded and not necessarily one side or the other, and be somewhere in the balance in the middle. Because I think taking risks and thinking outside of the box is something very important for a medical entrepreneur. Sometimes we don't realize that better things are actually outside of the boxes. So we need to reach out for them. One of the things that I believe many people like yourself have is I would say the willingness to persist more than anyone else in the field. So that's how you make progress, because sometimes you got knocked down and you need to go back.
And that's another piece actually I didn't include before, is doctors are in a business where the business is good. There's always going to be people that are sick. And if someone is tired of where they are, is feeling themselves getting burned out, you have an income stream. You also have some extra time that you can designate to a side project. And if you donate time to that side project, you water it, give it nutrients and flower it, eventually that can be a career, and you can leave the career that you don't like for something that's already started and stable. I think you don't have to jump with both feet. You don't have to quit in some dramatic way, but you can endure some uncomfortable experiences that are stable while you develop something that's more passion project oriented.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think most people don't realize that we all have 24 hours in a day. And the fact that we're using that time, good or bad, counts. And we all have a limited time in this life. And sometimes I believe that a lot of people that are working 9 to 5 jobs, they come home and they said, oh, I'm just waiting for the weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I'm just going to sit on my couch and watch a football game. But that's where the difference is made. I think a lot of people are using that time, like you said, to create a side business or to create an idea or look into alternative ways of income for themselves. And I want to kind of transition here and ask you about this very important notion of passive income streams for doctors, that sometimes a lot of them are having trouble of understanding that you as a medical professional cannot practice the whole life. At some point, you're going to get tired of it. You want to retire. You don't want to see patients anymore. And you have to have some kind of other types of income for the next 20, 30 years of your life. What do you think about that? How do you incorporate that in your life? And if there is any preference that you have for having such incomes?
Yeah, I think this goes under the heading of poor business training in medical education. Very few people know how to budget. They understand there's income, they understand they have expenses, and they just blindly go from one to the other, passing the money that they get onto the things that they want. And of course, you have to think about the future, and not that simply. You have to think about things which are stable investments and things which might be risky but could pay off. Basic financial advice is not really readily available. Econ 101 and basic sort of economic education in colleges doesn't do personal finance. It doesn't do how to invest. It doesn't understand the practicalities of business. So I think there's an opportunity there for doctors to seek out that information. A CME, continuing medical education, is a core part of medical education. There are opportunities to learn about finances, and sometimes to doctors that seems boring, but it really can pay off, so to speak, in the long run. In terms of my recommendations, I think there are sort of two types of investors. There are investors who follow their gut and their feelings and align with what they want ethically in the world. For example, people who would never invest in oil companies or cigarette companies, even if they're financially viable. There are also people who go with the greater wisdom. And I think knowing what you don't know, if you're not knowledgeable about finances and business and investing, is a perfectly reasonable approach. And what are the great leaders of investment investing in? And we know now, like, there was a Harvard student, I think, who just dropped out because he created an app that let you follow the investments of certain people. And I think that's a really simple, achievable strategy for many doctors and other healthcare professionals. But who do you esteem? Who's been financially successful you want to emulate? So there are a lot of ways. Either you can go it yourself and follow your own drive, or you can look to people who've done it a different way that you admire.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I think financial education is probably the most important thing for a lot of people. I was recently at a conference for passing investing for medical professionals, and I was very surprised the fact that a lot of them do not have the basic financial education. I think that's where you start. That, like you said, there's Econ 101 that you need to take. Is that little course of like financial planning and balancing your checkbook, basically, and go from there and look at types of investing maybe that you can fit your own profile.
One thing I want to add, physicians coming to startup companies or new companies that might have a medical bent have an unusual advantage. And rather than simply investing in a company that has nothing to do with you and doesn't take into account your expertise, physicians have the opportunity to invest in a medical company that includes them. They don't have to be passive investors. They can say, look, I'll be part of this company. I want to have a voice at the table, and then I'll share income. And then you can cheat because you can help the company succeed. You can use your network and your skills to help your investment.
But that takes something that a lot of people don't want to do, getting out of your comfort zone and try to think outside the box, like you said. And I'm trying to, even with this podcast, to expose people like yourself that are doing this type of things to the audience and say, look, it can be done. Someone who has a clinic, someone who has already patients and goes and see the patients can do some other things in their own time and create a business, create multiple businesses for that reason. I have some more ideas to create businesses. It's just a way you put yourself out and try to make the most of it out of your time that counts. And speaking about that, tell us a little bit about your next projects. What do you have in mind?
Yeah. So one of the things that I networked with was one of my business mentors. We've stayed in touch because he's been so helpful for me. He started a fund, a cannabis investment fund, and has done incredibly successfully. And I'm helping him as a subject matter expert. And we together figure out where are the opportunities. Now, because we've built this sort of strong connection, he knows how to invest in companies that are doing well. I know how to pick which companies have potential to do well and which ones seem like they're not just blowing smoke at people. And together we can find an opportunity to collaborate in a way that's stronger than each of us can bring alone. So that's one arm, is using what I know and building on it. I also am looking for other opportunities. I know that cannabis is going to be enormous, but I'm also aware that psychedelics are interesting to the general public. And I've just recently connected with a doctor who is a specialist in a psychedelic that I don't know much about. We're connecting and collaborating on potentially another private practice where we're going to emulate what I did on my own. We're going to learn from patients. We're going to read the literature. We're going to share what we've learned and build something that helps people. At its core, it's helping people. It's making money slowly. It's understanding what the culture is and lifting people one by one. But there's opportunities like this anywhere. One piece of advice I would leave people with: AI is not just for writing fancy emails or having fun conversations. Artificial intelligence, as it's growing up around us, these large language models, is one of the world's most wise, knowledgeable conversationalists. You can sit down to any of the companies that are out there, ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, there's now many options. You can have a conversation with this system, which is, hey, what should I know about business? What should I do to help myself get involved in businesses? And then you can ask, now take the opposite perspective. What should I be scared of? You can have these kinds of conversations as if you're at a round table with the world's most wise experts. This has never happened to us before. The way of learning is going to change. It's not just reading one book by one author. It's as many authors and as many perspectives as you can ask. So I think people, doctors especially, should take advantage of this to help themselves grow.
Yeah, this is a great advice. I remember when I graduated from medical school, and I'm sure it's the case for you too, the fact that we did not have internet. Our cell phones were those like little flip phones, and you can only make phone calls with that. So the whole notion of having the world in this little phone that we have in our hands. This is the basics of delegation, multiplication, networking with the whole world in a few minutes. And I think we all have to learn how to take advantage of that. I wanted to ask you also, what is something that you would advise someone who wants to go in your path and start off right now? Or for that matter, looking yourself in your mirror and your 20-year-old self, what would you say to him?
Ask for help. I'm here as a resource. As I mentioned, I'm happy to mentor doctors who are curious. I already have and will always continue to. I think be bold. I think our culture now favors people who are bold and thinking beyond the mold. And for most people, that's hard. So asking for help makes it easier to take a leap. It can be small leaps. As we're talking about AI, there's an MIT run research, I don't know if it's a company or just an app, but Open Evidence, where they basically have tailored an AI algorithm to surface peer-reviewed literature for guidelines. Any doctor who's practicing can use that and help their practice instantly. That's a baby step. Help yourself with more than just up-to-date. What is the evidence finding that up-to-date might not have? And then that can be a different step than someone who says, I'm thinking about other income streams. What skills do I have? Who can I talk to about surfacing the skills I might not really even know about? There are artists out there in the medical community who just put down their easel, but there's an opportunity there to create something. If you're passionate about a side project, about something that brings you joy, find a way to bring that into your income stream, into something that you do every day that brings you money and joy.
That's a great advice. Something that brings you money and joy. I love to end on this note. How is somebody who can learn more about what you're doing and can get in touch with you?
So one of the things I enjoy is actually translating what I'm learning. And that's basically become my entire social media presence. So I'm on Twitter and Instagram, of course. People that want to reach out, my website, benjamincaplan.com, is an easy way to get in touch with me. I'm happy to share advice. I'm happy to share more of my story. I think it's really a matter of just being available. Someone who's coming to me is available for new perspectives. I'm available to help share mine. And we come to a place, hopefully that's useful for someone.
That's awesome. That's great. I'm going to circle back with you maybe in a year from now and see what other businesses you created and what other ideas you have. I wish you good luck, and I hope the audience will learn more about you and get some good nuggets out of this interview. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.